given me and blessed me with, and taking my talents and trying to glorify Him through my passions and my talents. So.
Because we need Christians whose faith is alive right now.
God doesn't ask for anything in return from us. He just wants us to trust Him and believe that, He is the Almighty and sent His Son Jesus here to die on the cross to forgive us of our sins.
I'd rather share a Bible verse on Sunday morning with an audience of 100 than just try to sell products and not make any difference at all to an audience of 1 million. And then it's like, well, that's settled. Let's go.
We sit back and we develop this envious jealousy inside of us because somebody else is living the life that we want while we sit down and don't do anything about it. Get out, go enjoy it.
And then, of course, you and I would say, get in the woods.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Rise Kill Eat podcast. My name is Tyler Pruitt. I'm the host and founder of this show. I just want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode. This is going to be episode number 68. It's crazy to think that we are already on 68, but the fact of the matter is, we are here. If this is your first time listening to the Rise Kill Eat podcast, then I want to thank you for choosing to listen to the Rise Kill Eat podcast today. This show is all about three things. That's God, freedom, and the great outdoors. And all the conversations that we have on this show is centered around those things. I've been blessed with the opportunity to be able to talk with all kinds of incredible people from all across the world. Guys like Travis T-Bone Turner, Bud Fisher, Catching Deers, Jeff Danker of Buck Ventures. I mean, the list goes on and on. I could sit here and list so many incredible people that have prioritized those three things, that God, freedom, and the great outdoors, in their lives. And it's just a testament to what this podcast show is doing. And I know a lot of you guys can kind of resonate that fact, and I definitely appreciate the support that you guys have continued to give. You can check out the Rise Kill Eat podcast on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/RKEafield. That's RKE as in Rise Kill Eat. And then we're also on Instagram at the handle at Rise Kill Eat. All right, so you can check us out on there, follow us, give us a like, whatever the social media terms are nowadays. You can check us out on those two platforms. Today I am joined by Chris Hamm. Chris helps run his family business at HHA, and we'll be getting into that story today. I'm really excited to be able to share this conversation with you guys. Chris has an inspiring story of redemption and an inspiring story of giving back to military and veterans, and I know you guys are going to really enjoy this episode today. I know we say it all the time, and I've said it several times here, but that this show is all about God, freedom, and the great outdoors, and that's exactly what this conversation is all about. So I know you guys are going to enjoy it. Be sure to check out Chris on social media. He's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, and be sure to follow HHA Sports and HHA USA on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll have those links and the information in the show notes of the show. All right, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my conversation with Chris Hamm of HHA. All right, so I've got Chris Hamm right here on the Rise Kill Eat podcast. Thank you, Chris, for taking some time out of your evening. I definitely appreciate it, man.
Oh man, I'm excited to be here, and as you know, you and I were emailing back and forth for quite a few months here, and the enemy has a way of getting in our schedule sometimes, and I finally just said enough's enough. We're gonna do this thing here and knock it out. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's I guess to kind of set the stage a little bit for our listeners. We've been working on this, I think, since August, early September or so. But like you said, there's just been things that have come up on both ends, and it's just kind of the way life goes sometimes. But nonetheless, we are here in January, a little bit later than anticipated, but we are here, and we have a great opportunity to be able to come together and talk about, God, freedom, and the great outdoors, which is what this whole podcast is all about.
You bet. Yeah, no, I'm super excited, and it's we can get into this a little later, but it's kind of cool the way God works. Today was the first day of the virtual ATA show. Obviously, the ATA is not getting together because of COVID-19 this year, and
Yeah.
so this is the day that we pulled the cover off of our new products, so we can talk about that a little later. So had I come on earlier in the season, we wouldn't have been able to. I would have had to just been able to give you a teaser at that point, but
There we go. The enemy thought he could hold us back, but we ended up winning in the end. So,
amen.
But I first heard from you from Joe Bufford. I had Joe on back last summer, and he was telling me, he kind of gave me a list of some guys to check out, and your name was on that list, so I definitely had to check you out and check out what you're doing with HHA, and I'm definitely glad to be able to reach out with you, and part of that, the whole process, the whole scheduling process, which in my opinion, if people are wanting to get into podcasting, then that's probably the worst part of it, is the scheduling process. But the whole scheduling process also allows us an opportunity to hear your story about this past whitetail season. And so what did that kind of look like for you?
Oh man. Well, I mean, a lot of people think that, being one of the owners of HHA, a lot of people think, well, I must hunt all over the country and have leases in Illinois and Missouri and Kansas and you name it. And I did that stuff when I was younger, but I really don't have a huge desire to travel to hunt anymore. I traveled so much for our business over the years. I've just become a real homebody, and I'm very blessed. I've got 80 acres of family land, 15 minutes from where we're talking right now, and was actually able to purchase the neighboring 80 here last week. So now I've got 160 acres of ground that I have all to myself. And so one of the reasons you and I couldn't connect is I was chasing after a pretty good Wisconsin buck here for a good part of the fall, and unfortunately didn't connect on him, but I had 4 encounters with him, and he's still walking. I just checked my trail cams here on Sunday, and I've still got pictures of him with both of his horns. So
There we go. Yeah, there's always next year. That's my motto.
yeah, no, I'm pretty excited. I met with a good friend of mine that does food plots and plantings and kind of land management. Met with him and his daughter yesterday out at the property, and so our season's only been over for a week and a half, and I'm already itching for September, because I think I got a plan to put an arrow in this guy this year. So maybe I'll come back on in October once I get him on the ground.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, if you got 160 acres, especially up there in, prime Wisconsin area, I mean, that's pretty much all you need. You don't necessarily need to go traveling around all over the country and trying to spend all that money and trying to figure out your plan for that when you've got that right there in your backyard. So it's hard to beat that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love sleeping in my own bed every night. And like I said, from the time I leave my driveway till I'm settled into one of my redneck blinds, it might be a 25-minute endeavor. So it's pretty sweet. I was able to put a 153-inch buck on the ground last year during rifle season. I just couldn't connect with him with a bow, but it's the best buck I've taken to date. And my dad, who founded HHA, he passed away a year ago, July. So I was actually able to harvest that deer with his old 30-06. So it was pretty meaningful season for me, even though it wasn't an archery deer, and I'm an archery guy. It kind of gave me a renewed love for rifle hunting, and so I only cashed out on 2 deer this year, a doe and a decent 9-point, and those both fell victim to that same 30-06. So I'm getting into this gun hunting stuff.
Yeah. My I guess one of my other mottos is whatever is most effective and legal is going to be what I want to hunt with. But right. I can definitely understand from your perspective wanting to be an archery guy. But yeah, that's awesome. So you mentioned your dad there, but how did you get into hunting? Where did that start with you? Everybody's got their own story. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 40. What am I? I'll be 46 here in May. So, but I started shooting a bow and arrow when I was 4 or 5 years old, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And my dad had been into archery for probably a decade at that point, and hadn't broke through with HHA yet, but he was dabbling in, creating his own archery accessories and had a desire to get into business for himself. But at that point, we were just a low income Midwest family that loved hunting. And so I started shooting a bow and arrow at 5 years old, and been doing it ever since, and absolutely love it. So.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That's something that I'm getting my kids into. And my son, he's 7 years old, and he started shooting his little bow. I think it's got like a 10-pound pull on it. Just kind of getting into the groove of things a couple years ago. And I'm hoping that one day he'll have that same kind of story. And that's pretty cool to be able to introduce kids, because you never know what it's going to turn into. Like, I mean, it's definitely a blessing as a father to be able to pass down the tradition, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, and I mean, my older brother is 12 years older than I am, so I mean, he was already into archery as well at that point. So I mean, it obviously, just from the family perspective and everybody hunting together, that was great. But then once Dad got into business, and my brother and I both went off to college, we ended up ultimately both coming back and working for the business. So I mean, archery's been a part of my life as long as I can remember.
So what do you think it is about archery that that really kind of, I guess, kind of gets you. I've heard people explain that it's like the archery bug kind of bit them and they were never able to get away from it. So what do you think it is about the sport of archery that really attracts you and attracts, other people so much and with so much intensity?
Well, I think it's something. I mean, that's a question that's probably got a lot of different answers to it. But I mean, for me personally, I just, like I said, growing up around it, I've known it forever. Um, but just archery, even without hunting, I mean, it's just a fun sport. It's just fun to get out in the yard or go to the range and just shoot arrows and just kind of check out from everything that's going on in the world. It's you just kind of have to get honed in on that target, and it's archery is a lot of fun. It's a great sport for the whole family. I mean, it's we're HHA is a big sponsor of S3DA, so I go to the, maybe some of the kids that aren't as athletic and they're not going to be the starting center on the basketball team or the star quarterback, but I mean anybody can shoot a bow and arrow. So it really there's really nobody that not nobody, but I mean it's a pretty broad hobby that anybody can pick up, and with a little bit of training you can get pretty good at it in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that is true. That's definitely true. Yeah, I can see that. I'm a school teacher, so I work in public schools, and looking at the different districts that I've worked at over my short career as a teacher, and seeing the archery teams, and you really do have a diverse group of students that participate in school archery. Now that is also amplified in just the general hobby and the general sport as a whole, and you see all kinds of people of all body types that are able to participate in archery because of that, and just the diversity of participation, I think, is what is one of the many things that I think bites people, and and really really allows them to enjoy the sport. And especially if you decide to go out and hunt with a bow, and having that animal that close to you within 30-40 yards and seeing its breath coming out of its nose whenever you're got the bow pulled back on them. I mean, it's just it's hard to beat that experience.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said earlier, I've gotten back into gun hunting too. So just as far as just getting out in nature in general and just enjoying God's great outdoors, I mean, that's something that I've just grown to respect and enjoy a lot more in the last few years. It's not anything I ever took for granted, but after doing it so long, it's like, man, this, I'm only 45, 46 years old, but who knows when our last day on this earth's going to be. So every trip I take to the woods, I thank God for the opportunity. It's awesome to be out there.
Yeah, definitely is. So we were mentioning before, we were actually talking before we pushed record here, how you had shared your testimony at ATA, and I actually didn't know that before you had said that. So I'd love to be able to hear that, and I'd love for our listeners of the Rise Elite podcast, if you're willing and able to share, I mean, please feel free to share as much or as little as you'd want to.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and we had mentioned Joe Bufford too. I mean, Joe put out a great devotional called Dominion that a year ago November, he actually wanted me to write my testimony and share it in there, and I turned him down, and I think that was the enemy working on me. Just at that point, I wasn't maybe quite as comfortable sharing my faith, and I had just lost my dad, and the archery industry just wasn't quite what it was the year before. So I mean, HHA was not struggling, but we were trying to kind of get our mojo back, and so I came up with every excuse under the sun why I didn't want to share my testimony in Joe's book, and just politely told him no. And then not long after that, I was on the way out to my farm one afternoon, and I got a phone call from Howard Tripp, who runs Real Avid. They're a gun accessory company out of the Twin Cities area, and they're the ones that run the Target the Heart breakfast at the ATA show. Mm-hmm. And I was just pulling into the farm, so I didn't want to answer the phone, but I knew what he was calling for. And he wanted me to share my testimony at the ATA show, and this was a Friday afternoon. So I get into my blind and I listen to the voicemail, and the enemy was speaking that same thing to me. He's like, no, you're not going to do this, not right now. So I emailed Howard's wife that night and just thanked him for the opportunity, basically what I told Joe, and just said, now is not the time. Well, I was driving back out to my farm that Monday, the following, after the weekend was over, and I was literally on the same spot in the road where I got the phone call from Howard, and I just felt God telling me, somebody in that room needs to hear your testimony. And I mean, I get chills telling the story, and I went from a hard no to a hard yes in a fraction of a second. And so at that point, I decided that, it was something that I had to do. And so a little bit of my history, I was born and raised in a Catholic household, and went to church, went to catechism, the whole 9 yards. And then the more I got into junior high school, I didn't attend church as much. And I really kind of fell away from my faith. I never lost my belief in God, but I had no relationship with Jesus at all. I was just living life for myself. And so I go into tech college. I graduate from there. I go to work for my dad, buy myself a new truck, build a house, get married. Everything's perfect, and I don't have a relationship with God. I'm just living life on my own terms. Well, long story short, I was a pretty heavy drinker back in those days. And so my marriage ended up falling apart. I got divorced and kind of hit rock bottom, even though I was still able to perform all my functions for HHA. Nobody really saw, other than maybe some of my close friends in the industry, what was really going on. And so I was in a bad way about 10 years ago, and ended up meeting a Christian woman that totally turned my life around, and her witness to me helped me back to Jesus. And it's amazing. It was 2000. I don't have, some people have, have it down to the minute and the day exactly when it happened. And it was kind of a gradual thing for me over the course of time. I knew that if I was going to stay with her, and if I was going to stay either out of jail from getting a DUI or stay on this side of the dirt, I was going to have to change my ways.
Yeah.
And so I quit drinking. God just completely took that desire away from me totally. I haven't had a drop for 5.5 years now. And
congratulations. That's a huge deal.
Yeah. And it's especially tough in our industry. And I don't want to stereotype the archery industry, but you go to an ATA show and there's a lot of that going on after hours. And and for a long time, I lived under the false belief that, that version of me was why we were successful. I had an arrogance about me that thought, well, people like that version of Chris. That's why HHA is popular. And that was another lie from the enemy. So just being able to put all that behind me and now live my life for him. And I say it all the time to my friends, more Christ and less Chris.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge on a daily basis. We're all sinners. We still have that struggle, but just having that center and that spiritual GPS every day when you wake up, and knowing that you can go there and everything's going to be okay regardless of what transpires before you go to bed. It's a comfort, and something that I want to share with people, because my life is 180 degrees from what it used to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's an incredible story, man. And the Bible tells us to die to ourselves, and that's exactly what it sounds like you had to do. You had to take the old Chris and you had to literally crucify him so that Jesus could take the place. That's really what we have to do in order to have that relationship, have that true relationship with him, is be able to selflessly, crucify ourselves so that Jesus can become alive in us and be resurrected in us. That's the thing about the resurrection, the crucifixion story, is that I think it's the moment in which Jesus became sin so that we can be reconciled with God, but it's also a symbol of, I guess, what we have to do almost on a daily basis, because we have to die to ourselves. It says take up our cross on a daily basis and die to ourselves so that we can I guess have that relationship with Jesus. And that's an awesome story.
Yeah, no, it was life changing for me. I was baptized as a Catholic, as a baby when I was 6-8 weeks old, but ended up having a water baptism in August of 2017, about 6 weeks before I got married to my wife, that helped me come back to my salvation. So we do that with our church out at a lake every summer. And you talk about an emotional day, and I was actually in the restroom at the lake and met another gentleman in the bathroom that I've actually gotten to be pretty good friends with, and he was in a similar boat to me, where he was he was a water ski guy and a big partier and heavy drinking, and he and I got baptized together. So we stay in touch and encourage one another. And I mean, it's awesome when you start living your life not through your own eyes, but through God's eyes, what opportunities and the people that he brings to you and the successes and what your definition of success is totally changes too once you've given your life to Christ. But yeah, it's just been an awesome journey. I just shake my head and smile and nod quite a bit, because some of this stuff you can't make up. The best writer in the world couldn't write a book like this.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that the definition of success really changes. Like once you are brought into Christ, and it's definitely true. And it's I think whenever we're in the world, we have the secular idea of what success looks like, which is like a lot of money, a lot of popularity, people like us and all that kind of thing. Whereas success in God's eyes isn't necessarily that. In a lot of ways, it's the opposite of that. Like it's a humility towards him, and to recognize him as the provider, and to be sanctified by him. And it's a lot of those things are going to get you made fun of in a lot of popular circles. And that's pretty cool that you have, especially being in the head position of your business. That's great that you obedient to God in that way.
Yeah, well, and it's you talk about those successes. I mean, that was all I used to base my happiness around was the money and the new truck and the house and the the awards and the notoriety that we would get from within the industry. And I think it was back in 2012, 2013. I got put on the cover of Archery Business and it was at the Matthews show. We introduced our Optimizer Cadet, which is a youth site for like new archers, and it's a really small product. So I had it sitting in the palm of my hand, and then the picture was real distorted. The guy told me to stick my hand out as far as I could so you see me holding this bow sight. And I know I was hungover. I guarantee I was hungover during the picture. And I actually put that up on the screen when I shared my testimony, because the publisher at the time, he and I got to be pretty good friends. He called me. I remember I was sitting in the Walmart parking lot, and I saw it come up as his caller ID, and I knew exactly what he was going to do, because he had joked with me that he was always going to put me on the cover of Archery Business. And before I even said hello, I'm like, "You're putting me on the cover, aren't you?" And this was before I was saved. And he laughs. He's like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that for you, Hammer." And I just remember not even being happy about it at the time, because I was such a lie. I mean, you look at that picture and it's like, man, that guy literally has the world in the palm of his hands, and I was empty because I didn't have Christ in my life. And so I hadn't looked at that picture. I think I threw away every copy we had in the office. My mom's got one, but I didn't even want to have one. And when I got ready to share my testimony, I knew that was the picture that I had to use, just because it's so powerful to see what that picture of me looks like and what a low point I was at. And then to hear my story on top of that, it's pretty powerful, because so many people in this world are living for the wrong reasons. They've got the wrong gods and the wrong idols in their life, and I was one of them for a long time. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, growing up, I remember watching my dad and my grandpa. Both of them were alcoholics, and dealt with addictions to pain pills and all that kind of thing. And I remember being young. I mean, probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, watching them, doing what they do. And I just remember thinking, I don't know. I'm sure it was God that was putting this in my heart, but I just remember thinking, like, I don't want to do that. Like, because I could see, a lot of what you were saying is that emptiness, that they were striving for more, and they were trying to find it at the bottom of the bottle, and they just never found it. And I remember making the decision, I guess as a young kid, to that I was going to, change the family tree. And thank God up to this point I've been able to. And that's something that is definitely heavy in a lot of people's lives. And, if people do have that kind of addictions, they do have those types of things, then definitely seek some help. I mean, find somebody that can help you out with that, whether it be a pastor or counselor, or, a combination of the two, whatever that is. It can definitely be pretty tricky. But the good news is with you, Chris, is that God won in the end. So here we are, and now you're on the Rice Elite podcast giving your testimony about it. So there we go.
No, it's because I know that there's a lot more Chris Hamms out in the world that are living the exact life that I was. And I mean, I'm not self-righteous at all. I've been saved by the grace of God, and I just know that my story, which is ultimately God's story, is going to impact other people and hopefully help them turn their lives around. And I mean, that's my job. Even though I own an archery business, I joke with people. I say I work for Jesus. He just lets me play with bows and arrows 8 hours a day.
Yeah, that's not a bad deal.
That's kind of
So
how
speaking of,
that's how I view things. So
yeah, definitely. So speaking of, what kind of role are you currently playing with HHA sports? I mean, I know that's something that you had mentioned earlier that your dad had started. So, what's the kind of the evolution as far as how you were involved in that process?
yeah, I mean, we started in 1984. We started with one product, and a lot of people don't know this, but it was a folding stabilizer, which ironically that's what we got back into as of today. Where HHA is back into the stabilizer business for the first time in probably 15 years. It's probably been that long since we've had a stabilizer.
Yeah.
But that was the first product we had when I was 9 years old, and mom and dad and I and my brother and my sister, we were the only employees, and so I was answering the phones when I was 9 years old. I was putting products together, packaging, all that stuff. And then as I got into high school, I didn't really have the knack for building stuff, even though I was a Lego kid. I decided I wanted to sit behind a desk and do what my dad did instead, which, I mean, he was still the designer, but so I got into the marketing and the advertising role right out of college and did that. So I was our promotions guy for the better part of 15 years, almost 20. And then his health started to deteriorate a little bit he had a heart attack in 2000. So I'm sorry, 96 it was. But so I started to kind of graduate into some more, supervisory roles and working on the financial stuff. And so my job has evolved somewhat over the years. We've now got a sales manager that handles 90% of my old job. So I'm kind of the strategic planning guy and the financial guy, and still handle some of the parts ordering and oversee the production a little bit. So I wear quite a few hats, but luckily we've got so many awesome employees that we get to work with every day, and they've taken a lot of my old jobs away from me. So that's allowed me to have probably my HHA workday might be 5 or 6 hours a day. This time of year we're still going pretty hard just because we're trying to get new product launched and wrapping up all that stuff. But in another few weeks, once that settles down, I'll be able to knock out my HHA work in 3 to 4 hours a day, and then I can devote more time on my veterans nonprofit. So
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. And this is something that you also do with your brother, right? I know you mentioned you have an older brother, and is he involved at all in HHA?
In the business itself.
In the business itself, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I had read that. Okay, I thought so.
Yep, he sure is. Yeah. So the way that all started out, kind of the timeline of it all, like I said, we started in '84. My brother came back to work full time in '92. Actually, I think it was the fall of '91. So at that point, we had gotten into caliper releases. That's when they were getting real big, and so my dad decided that we just couldn't compete if we weren't making our own parts. Up until that point in our history, the first 7 years, we were working with outside machine shops to source all of our parts, and it just wasn't profitable. So my brother had a machining and an engineering background. So Dad told him, "Hey, I want you to come back and start a machine shop for us so we can start making some money." So that was 1991, and then '96. That's when I got out of tech school. So at that point, then I was back full time running the marketing side of things. So it worked out well because Dad basically wore all those hats for the first almost 10 years, and then was fortunate enough that both of his sons were able to wear hats that the other guy didn't want to wear.
Yeah.
So that worked out real well. So yeah, my brother does 100% of the design work. I mean, I have a little bit of input on it, not a ton, but just enough to kind of keep him honest. And then Scott, our sales manager's got some input on that stuff as well. So we're kind of a triple-headed spear that way as far as how the design goes. But like I said, the bulk of that falls on my brother.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great that you guys have had that family involvement all throughout that whole process. And that's something that I can definitely admire, looking at, businesses all throughout American history. It's really cool to see those family brands that have grown together. I mean, you see it obviously with what you guys are doing, and I had Adam Weatherby on here over the summer, and being able to talk with him, listening to some of the family stories of business and all that kind of thing. It's really cool to hear those.
Yeah, and then my sister, I mean, she still works for us. She's a year younger than my brother, so I mean, she's been working for us for 30 plus years, and my mom is semi-retired. She probably wouldn't like me saying that because I think she'd still like to be working, but she just could never figure out a computer. So up until about 3 years ago, we were actually still handwriting every one of our invoices, if you can believe that.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a picture of her on the wall in the office with the very last invoice that she ever wrote. I think it was Halloween of 2017, and it was invoice. It's in the 125,000 range.
Uh-huh.
So
that's awesome.
So 2 carpal tunnel surgeries later, she's
handwriting all that. So
yeah,
that'll do it.
She still handwrites all the bills and does the bank deposit for me. So, but her workload has been reduced tremendously. So she's the queen of solitaire now. We joke with her about that. So
there we go. That's awesome. That's great. But I was wanting to kind of switch gears a little bit towards the products that HHA offers, and I had a question written down here about stabilizers, and basically, with me, I don't use a stabilizer. I've seen people use them. I've seen people use all kinds of different, sizes and that kind of thing. So what exactly is a stabilizer, and, how can it really affect your archery shot?
Yeah, I mean, the bows have gotten so efficient that they're, I hear more and more people that aren't using stabilizers just because the bows are pretty well balanced. But
yeah,
but depending on what kind of shooting you're doing, I mean, especially if you're doing a lot of long distance stuff, which with the efficiencies of these bows and the products we make and all of our competitors make, I mean, the effectiveness of a bow and arrow has grown tremendously in the last 20 years. So people are reaching out longer, and when you do that, you need more balance on that bow. So having a front stabilizer, that's where they were for years. But now more and more people are actually running a rear stabilizer out the back to really kind of fine tune that balance of the bow and get it exactly where you want it. So that's what we pursued this year, was with our Tetra LR series, we're calling it. We've got front stabilizers, rear stabilizers. We've got additional weights. We've got a V-bar, sidebar adjustment bracket. We've got slings. So I mean, we didn't just come with one stabilizer. We came with kind of the whole everything, including the kitchen sink, and we're pretty excited about it. So.
Yeah, so it's more of a longer range. Maybe that's why I don't use them, because I'm happy if I can hit it at 40 yards. So, that's great though.
Yeah, and I mean they're not strictly longer range. I mean, we've got we have a 6, an 8, and a 10-inch model. So I mean, people that are just happy shooting 30, 40 yards like yourself, yeah, that 6-inch front stabilizer is probably going to be all they need. But once I started doing all these archery shoots and 3D shoots that I do for veterans, some of those shots can be a little bit longer. And so I started running a rear stabilizer about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's really improved my shot. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. And that's something that HHA offers, and all the listeners out there, I'll have links in the show notes and the details for all that kind of stuff. So what else is HHA? I mean, what else you guys got coming up? I know we've mentioned several times that you guys have some new products in the works as we speak right now, and today is, I guess, official release day. So what's going on with the new products?
Yeah, I mean that was the new product, the stabilizers I was just talking about. That stuff literally just dropped today. We've been working on that since probably February of last year. So I mean, this has been almost a year in the making. We're still probably 30 to 45 days away from shipping. I would think probably by the middle to the end of February we'll start shipping products. So if your listeners do go on the website, they're going to see them out of stock right now, because we just pretty much pulled the cover off the new car today. But we'll be delivering them here in the next 4 to 6 weeks. So
yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That's fantastic, man.
Yeah, I was going to say our claim to fame. What most of your listeners probably know us for is the optimizer and the Tetra series bow sights. That's what really put us on the map back in the mid 90s, and we just for the 17th year in a row, we just got the Bow Hunters Bow Hunting World Readers Choice Award, Gold Award for the top adjustable sight in the industry. So that's something that we don't brag about it, but we're at the same time we're humbled that that's a award that's voted on by the end users. So I mean, for 17 years in a row, the archery public that bow hunts, that uses adjustable sights thinks that we're the best. So that's something that we don't take lightly, and that's why we're always innovating and coming out with new products. So.
Yeah, that's a huge deal, and that's a huge accomplishment to be able to, especially in those peer voted, peer reviewed type of scenarios. I mean, if you've got a product that obviously a lot of people are enjoying and think is worthy of an award, that's a huge deal, especially for your business.
Yeah, and I mean it's a category that's really blown up in the last 10 to 15 years. It's not like we're the only kid on the block. There's definitely a lot of competitors and a lot of good competitors. I mean we're friends with everybody that's making bow sights, and we shake hands and exchange greetings and hunting stories with all these guys and gals at the show. So there's a lot of good products out there. So that makes it even more, I don't want to say impressive, but even more humbling to know that even with everybody that's doing this, we're still number one. So.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've seen. I was looking at the website actually today, as a matter of fact, kind of just getting ready for this, and I saw that you guys have a single pin sight on there. Now, I've always been the sight I have right now is it's a 3-pin. I've also seen 4 or 5-pin sights, and I've seen people have some success with those single pins. So as far as the single pin goes, if people are apprehensive to switching over to that, or if there's anything that they need to know, I mean, what would you kind of recommend as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of single pins out on the market. Our kind of our claim to fame that we patented probably back 2006, 2007. Our sight tape is pretty unique in how you dial it in. So basically, you sight in at 20 and 60 yards with a setup tape, and then you go to the package, and there's a whole array of pre-printed yardage tapes, and one of those is going to fit your system, and then that'll be dialed in depending on the model. It'll either be dialed in from 20 to 80 in 5-yard increments, or on our higher end models, it's actually 20 to 101 yard increments. I mean, the accuracy of the single pins has really gone up over the years. And I know, some people are a little apprehensive on a 1-pin. Well, what happens if the deer's at 20 yards, all of a sudden he runs out to 40? I mean, bottom line, if you're shooting 1-pin or 3 or 5 or 7, if that animal does that, chances are you're going to have to let down and range it again to see where he's at.
Yeah.
I've been bow hunting all my life, like I said earlier, and I don't think I've ever harvested an animal at more than about 30 yards. So, and with the efficiency of the bows these days, you can probably shoot 0 to 35 or 0 to 40, just leaving that single pin at 25 yards and kind of knowing what your bow does out to 40. So that's how we try to sell some of the critics or people that might be on the fence about shooting a 1-pin.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I mean, that's something that, like you were saying, if you do have that scenario where you have a deer come in at 20 and it ends up going out to 35, 40, 45 yards, but you're going to have to know what that distance is anyway. So, I mean, a minor adjustment to something that could be, very accurate is definitely worthwhile. So yeah, that's a very good point.
And it's just that visual too. I mean, as the bows have gotten faster, obviously, if you're shooting multiple pins, those pins are going to get closer together. So, and unfortunately, as we get older, our eyes aren't as good. So you throw all those factors into a pot and mix them up, and all of a sudden you're looking at a gob of pins out there, and you don't know which one to grab to shoot at the deer. So we've had a lot of people over the years that have shot multiple pins and made the switch to single, and their only complaint is they wish they would have done it sooner. So
yeah, admittedly this year it was actually early October. I missed a doe because I had her on the wrong pin, believe it or not. So it's actually funny that we've switched to this type of conversation, because I had her I ended up hitting her just a little bit high because I was a 1 pin too low. So just because of that range, and she had moved and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's definitely worthwhile, I guess, from firsthand experience to make sure that you got that range, make sure you got everything lined up there.
Yeah, well, it's only January. I'll get one on your doorstep, and you can play with it this spring and see if you like it or not. Maybe we'll have another convert on our hands. Here comes September.
That's awesome. But yeah, we've mentioned it a couple of times here, but you've got a little something else going on with HHA, and that's the Operation HHA USA, which is where you guys are you're doing these 3D shoots with veterans, which is absolutely fantastic. I guess I can kind of let you explain what that is.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that God started putting that on my heart kind of right around the time that I got saved. I mean, before I was saved, I was selfish. I was all about Chris, and the older I got, and then once I did get saved, it was like he was just convicting me that there's there's more to life than just you. I've blessed you with a lot. What are you going to do with that to bless somebody else?
Yeah.
And right around that same time, we were getting a lot of calls, a lot of emails, posts on social media from veterans and active duty service members looking for a military discount. So we had started that military discount probably a couple of years prior to this. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Honor Flight Network at all.
Yeah, I've actually heard of it. Yeah.
Okay, so for your listeners that haven't, Honor Flight was started back in the early 2000s, originally designed for World War II vets to send them to DC to visit the memorials built in their honor. And that has now blown up in the last 15 plus years to 140 chapters around the country. I think they've sent over 250,000 veterans from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam to Washington, D.C. to visit the war memorials. So it's an awesome organization, and it was something that I volunteered for 5 years ago and just absolutely fell in love with it. And a couple of years into doing it, I was driving home from the airport one night, and I thought, man, I've got this very successful archery business with a lot of connections in the industry. How can I leverage that to raise money for Honor Flight? And so, long story short, I put on 3 archery shoots in 2017, and we were able to raise $15,000 over 3 weekends for our local Honor Flight chapter.
Wow.
And then that doubled to 30,000 in 2018, and then in 2019 it went up to 45,000. So I mean, in 3 years' time, we raised almost $100,000, $90,000 for our local Honor Flight. And the more of those shoots that I did, I would have people that would come up to me and be like, man, I'm from 2 hours away. Would you ever think about coming down there? And the more I thought about it, it's like, well, yeah, I would love to, but I don't really have the fundraising bucket to do that, because I was essentially just working as a volunteer for this local Honor Flight chapter. So at that point, I decided to start HHA USA as my own 501c3. And then something else that I'm also very passionate about is PTSD and the 22 veterans a day. So once we started HHA USA last year, we take the first 22% of our monies raised to help raise awareness for the 22 a day and combat PTSD. And we've partnered with 3 other organizations, Wounded Warriors in Action, the Neested Foundation, and Adam LaRoche's E3 Foundation. And all 3 of those groups, that's their wheelhouse. They get vets out into the outdoors or on fishing trips and just love on them and help them combat some of those issues that they've had from their time in combat. So pretty cool deal. We put on 8 events last year. Even with COVID-19, we were able to hold 8 outdoor 3D shoots and
awesome.
Indoor shoots. And we raised $60,000. I mean, it's been really, really cool to see it grow. I've got 6 or 7 people that I've met in the 5 years of doing this that have become really, really close friends because they've got the same heart as I do for veterans that are my volunteers now. My wife helps me behind the scenes with all of the door prize stuff. We do a lot of silent auctions, so she's the brains behind all that and helps me do that. So I mean, none of us take a dime from it. All the money that we make goes back to our veterans. So it's just been something that God's got a big plan for it. I'm just curious to see what that's going to look like. But I could potentially see this thing growing beyond Wisconsin in the next few years. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. That is awesome. I mean, that is absolutely incredible. And it's interesting that you mentioned the 22%. You know, is that I guess a symbol of the 22 veterans? I'm assuming that, you know, take their lives every day because of suicide and, you know, related to PTSD, related to their time in the military.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where the 22 a day came from. So I mean, you know, we raised roughly $60,000 this year, so 22% of that is, you know, a little over $12,000. So we're going to divide that 3 ways between those other 3 partners of ours, and you know, it's going to be a check for $4,000. I'm going to get to cut to those guys, and they can then mobilize that and use it to bring some veterans out and love on them. I remember when I sat down, the Wounded Warriors in Action was actually started by a gentleman here in Wisconsin, and now they put on about 50 or 60 events around the country every year, whether it be duck hunts, fishing, archery hunts for deer, you name it. They do all this different stuff. But I met with one of the volunteers a couple of years ago, and I was kind of trying to just feel them out and see if it was somebody that I wanted to work with. And they had a veteran that came in for a spring cast and blast. So they did a little fishing and they went out on a turkey hunt. And this gentleman from the service they didn't have a good week of hunting, and he ended up shooting a big tom on the last morning of his last day of his hunt.
Yeah.
And he told the guide when he left, he's like, I was going to go home and end it,
Man.
after this hunt, and this hunt basically saved my life.
Man.
And I get emotional even talking about that, and it's like, man, if we even have one story like that, I don't know how long the Lord's going to have me doing this, whether it's for another year or another 50 years, as long as I'm here. If we can have one story like that come out of what we're doing, all of our work is going to be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely is. That's incredible. That's crazy how God works through this hunting thing. You know, it's crazy to sit here and think that, like, you know, guys like you and me and, you know, millions of people all across the country, we get up early and at crazy times on the weekends to go out and pursue these animals, but you don't really know what else is going on, you know, with these other people. And, you know, especially these people that are dealing with these PTSD, and they're dealing with different, you know, type things that they've had to deal with because of their service, or because of, you know, health issues or whatever it is related to that. You know, it's just crazy that something like that has the potential. God has the potential for God to use it in a way that's literally saving people's lives. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your brain around it when you think about it, but it's awesome to be a part of it. And the support from within our industry is just amazing. I mean, like I said, I've been fortunate enough to know a lot of good people over the years in our industry, but I mean, I just started sending out all my emails here last week to touch base with folks and see if they wanted to come back as product sponsors, because we don't ask for cash from anybody. It's just all industry people are sending, you know, trail cameras and boots and camel clothes and bows and crossbows, you name it. I mean, you go to one of our archery shoots and it looks like a Whitetails Unlimited or a QDMA or a Rocky Mountain Elk Banquet crossed between an archery shoot, because we'll have anywhere from 40 to 70 items out for silent auction at every one of our shoots.
Man, that's awesome. That's great. Man,
it's become a really really neat platform, and yeah, like I said, I'm excited to see where it's going to go. So
yeah, I've actually seen you know, some of the episodes of Buck Commander with Adam LaRoche, and seeing some of the guys that they pull in, you know, with his E3 Ranch Foundation, and it's really cool to sit there and watch, you know, his interaction and you know, I guess the interaction of everybody involved, because there is an appreciation for what those guys and gals have had to go through, you know, in order to secure our freedoms and be able to, you know, have the opportunity to have podcasts like this right here, and, you know, being able to share our faith, you know, freely. And it's a lot of it's because of the brave men and women that have served. I mean, it's great that you guys have a program where you basically give a little bit back, and to make sure that, you know, they have somebody to check in on them and make sure that, you know, they're enjoying, you know, I guess, God's creation through the process. That's great.
yeah, no, it's an awesome program. I mean, Adam is he's a special man. I met him about 10 years ago, and again, that was before I got saved. So I mean, that was when he was still playing ball, and I thought, man, this is awesome. And at that point, I had hooked up with a few different ball players that were archers, but Adam and I got together a few times when he was in Milwaukee. He'd get us tickets for games, and we'd go out to lunch and stuff. And I mean, who knew that, you know, 10 years after we meet, he and I are partnered together on raising money for veterans. I mean, I remember the day that I called him on the phone and asked him if he'd be all right if we'd partner with him, and he was just about in tears. I mean, he is one of the most genuine human beings that I've ever met in my life. I mean, you talk about a man that's sold out for the Lord and is doing his work. He's Adam LaRoche is a top-notch fella. So
yeah, I've always been inspired by his story of his son, you know, and what kind of led to his retirement, you know, his involvement in getting into stopping sex trafficking and all that kind of thing. It's his story's always been inspiring, and, you know, the fact that he's, you know, partnering with you guys and you know, giving back to veterans as much as he can is absolutely incredible. You know, I didn't serve in military. I didn't do any of that, but I am, you know, a patriot through and through, and I can definitely appreciate, you know, veterans and the sacrifice that they've given. And, you know, I've seen it with my own family members and seen it with my friends and that kind of thing that have served. And it's a pretty tough gig. So I definitely am thankful for those guys and gals.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, I had a couple uncles that served in Korea. They were stateside, so I mean, they didn't have any stories. But my father-in-law served in Vietnam, and he's again, I'd put him right up there with an Adam LaRoche. I mean, he's just an amazing man of God, and will do anything to serve anybody, and has just been super influential in my walk with the Lord. And I was actually honored to be able to go on the honor flight with him last year ago, September.
Hmm.
Um, was able to go to DC with him and experience that trip with him. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. So what's the future of the HHA USA and your archery shoots? What's it kind of looking like right now? You guys got anything planned for 2021?
Yeah, we originally had put 12 shoots out on the calendar, but then with COVID-19, the indoor stuff wasn't looking so good. So we actually had to cancel our first 4 events. So our first shoot of 2021 won't be until May. And it is disappointed as I was to cancel off those 4 events. As soon as I went from 8 to 12, I'm like, man, what am I doing? I got a business to run, and now I got 12 archery shoots to plan. So I was I was going to keep my commitment, but at the same time, I had a little bit of buyer's remorse because my schedule got a little aggressive. So I guess this was the Lord's way of telling me that 8 shoots is what I should be doing. So
Yeah.
now we're really just getting dialed in with that first shoot in May, which is only about a half hour from the Matthews factory. So, and another kind of cool God story is about 2 years ago, I was at one of my shoots actually here in our hometown at the archery club, and I looked across the clubhouse and I saw this guy wearing a really cool looking red, white, and blue Matthews hat. And I'm like, man, I got to get one of those hats. I had never seen it anywhere. So I went over and I started talking to him, and I looked at him. And I'm like, do I know you? And he told me his name, and I'm like, no kidding. And here it was a guy that I had played high school basketball with back in 91 or 92. So I hadn't seen him for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And long story short, after he got out of high school, he ended up going into the military, and he just recently retired and was the president of an archery club down in Toma, which is not very far from Sparta, where Matthews is located. So, a quarter century later, I run into this guy that I used to play basketball with in high school, and now he's completely on board with what we're doing. So he's one of those volunteers that I spoke to you about, and they've got a really, really cool club down there. It's a rod and gun club, so we're actually going to do a 2-man 3D scramble the night of our first shoot, and got our friends from Chase Nation Outdoors that are they're a film crew out of Milwaukee that does a bunch of cool stuff, and so they're going to come up and film it for us. And we've actually got a couple other veterans coming in, so really going to be doing a really, really neat film project with those guys, probably a 15-20 minute short film on kind of on the HHA USA thing, but more so on these 2 veterans that I'm bringing in. So I'm excited to tell their story and get that out to all of our followers here this summer.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be on the lookout for that, because that's going to be pretty awesome to check out, man. So if people are interested in, HHA USA, if they're interested in HHA products, where can they find all that? Where can they connect with you, and where can they connect with the business?
Yeah, I mean, our for-profit business, hhasports.com. We're on Instagram and Facebook, and then HHA USA. I actually run all of our social media for that myself, so you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. And then hhausa.org is our website. So, and a lot of times we'll get, I'll post a new shoot, and people will be like, "Oh man, I'm down in Texas. I really wish I could help you out." And I mean, for people that want to do that, we do have that donation button on there. So, I mean, any funds that we get, that'll plug into honor flight chapters, as well as helping to fight that 22 a day and getting some men and women of the service out hunting and fishing and doing the things that we love so much. So that's how you can connect with us. And then me personally, people want to follow me, I'm on Instagram as well. It's just Chris Hamm 2517, and I picked that because of 2 Corinthians 5:17, which talks about basically being reborn in Christ. The old is gone, the new is here. So that was when I got back on social media, I wanted to have some kind of a connection there, and that was the verse that I used the day that I got baptized. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll make sure I put all the links for that in the show notes of this show. They'll be able to go right down there, click on those links, and it'll take them right through the website. So I'll also have all the social media and all the connections for that, man. So, Chris, I definitely appreciate you taking some time this evening. I'm glad we were able to get this scheduled and be able to get this recorded. I'm looking forward to being able to share this with everybody because this was a really great, wholesome conversation, man. So thank you so much for taking some time.
Man, Tyler, I appreciate I appreciate your patience in working around my crazy schedule. That was I'm going to blame that on my deer. So hopefully,
there we go.
We'll put Houdini to rest here in September, and we can come on and talk about him again. But no, I appreciate you and everything that you're doing. I think the platform for this podcast is awesome, and this world needs more of this stuff right now. So keep doing what you're doing.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. All right, guys, so there you have it. There is my conversation with Chris Hamm of HHA. Be sure to check out what he's doing with HHA USA. It's an incredible organization that he has put together to help give back to military veterans. And also be sure to check out HHA products. I'll have the links for all that in the show notes of this show. Thank you guys for joining me for another episode of the Rice Elite podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And I'll see you guys next time.